Look, classic bodybuilding and powerlifting workouts are great for building muscle and strength, but they are pretty limited. Heavy squats and leg press build size, but what about balance, agility, mobility, and overall athleticism? That's where calisthenic leg training really shines. With just your body weight, you can unlock more variety, more functionality, and way more athletic movement than you will ever get sticking to a machine or a barbell. So today we're going to break down some of the best calisthenic leg exercises, and these moves will help you hit your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, your adductors, your abductors, help you work on knee, ankle and hip mobility, and all of that while building balance, explosiveness and control over your entire body. So if you're ready, let's go and have some fun. Now as usual, we're going to start with the basics first, but lucky for us, the basics are already the king of leg exercises, the deep squat, going through a full range of motion as to grass. A perfect exercise if you want to start combining leg strength as well as control and overall mobility. Start bending in your ankles, knees and hips and working on building a foundation that's going to benefit you in your other leg exercises. Doing so while working on your endurance as well and focusing more on our quads as well as on our glutes. Since you want to go for a full range of motion, and the full range of motion is both feet flat on the ground as to grass, your goal is to be able to sit down all the way and reverse that exact same movement with the longest range of motion. If you are struggling with sitting down all the way, the easiest thing you can do is elevate your heels, which in turn is going to make anyone, it doesn't matter how bad your hip, knee and ankle mobility is, sit down all the way over time. The higher the elevation, the easier it will be, and over time you can reduce that elevation until you are flat on the floor once you have developed the necessary strength and mobility to sit down all the way. And once you have perfected your deep squat, you're going to open up worlds of different exercises, more advanced exercises. They're going to help you benefit even more if you're going to put them together with the classic squat. Staying close to the same movement pattern, but working a little bit more with static exercises. You will have a hard time finding an exercise as effective as the horse stance, which makes sense. It is one of the oldest leg exercises we've been doing as humans, helping us build massive leg strength, especially in our quads and our glutes, because we need to open up those legs and push our knees outwards, always following our toes into the same direction, requiring a ton of strength and building a ton of static strength as we start progressing and as we start holding this for longer and longer periods. And there's pretty much only two things you should keep in mind to get the most benefit from this exercise, which is number one, we're moving the tiniest bit into external hip rotation, meaning turning our feet outwards. And depending on your mobility, you might start with a very close stance, and over time you will step out the more hip mobility you develop, so you can add more and more strength benefits. And of course we need to hit the right depth, which is your hip joints slightly lower than your knee joints. And you can use, for instance, a broomstick. You can place this on your quads very close to your hips, so you can instantly notice that you are holding the right depth. Trust me, if you can work yourself up to 4 to 5 minutes of horse stances, you will be one of the strongest people when it comes to static leg strength, while helping you build a lot of hip mobility and control over this region, which is going to come in very handy with the upcoming exercises. Now, one of the things that most people forget working on, and that leads to a lot of problems and a lot of injuries, is foot strength. And the toe squat is one of the most useful exercises to take care of this problem, because we're elevating our heels means if you are lacking the hip, knee and ankle mobility to sit down all the way with flat feet, now you should be able to do it. And we are standing on our toes, requiring a lot of balance, a lot of strength and a lot of control through our legs and our stabilizers to be able to lower down all the way without our heels getting down to the floor, and to be able to reverse this movement without losing balance. You're going to hit fatigue far quicker than you would with the classic squat, but this exercise is going to help you build massive strength combined with the balance you're going to need for some of the most advanced calisthenic leg exercises. And now we can move to some of the more unilateral exercises, which are going to exponentially add benefits to your workout. And we can start with one of my favorite leg exercises, and that is the lunge. An amazing exercise for not only building strength, but also adding a lot of hip flexor flexibility, which in turn is going to help us with our hip mobility. And by far my absolute favorite part about lunging exercises is the scalability. Not only do you have a lot of variations, starting with the classic forward lunge, the classic backwards lunge, a variety adding some hip mobility by crossing over when we reverse, of course going through a long range of motion. And while we are on that topic, making this exercise more beneficial and harder is as easy as increasing the range of motion by adding some elevation. We have the classic forward lunge, classic backwards lunges with crossover, And one thing that I enjoy doing a lot and that adds a lot of explosivity to this exercise is combining backwards with forward lunges with speedy movements, and switching between the forward and the backwards will help you build massive control while adding a lot of balancing to your exercise. Moving us to an exercise that is going to build parts of the foundation we're going to need for our vertical leap or box jumps. The step up is not just an amazing unilateral exercise that is very applicable to our normal life because we usually need to walk upstairs. Sometimes it is one of the most accessible and also one of the most scalable exercises, not only with our forward but also with the sideways step up, and also uncommon but should be taken care of, the backwards step ups. And increasing the difficulty as well as the benefits from this exercise is as easy as increasing your elevation to increase your range of motion. Now we're also working a lot more on our hip, knee and ankle mobility, which in turn is going to help us with more advanced exercises, while building a lot more strength and a lot more control through stabilization and balancing, and elevating this even more until we reach the spot where we can barely elevate our heel high enough to be able to step up like so, will add even more benefits to our flexibility and our mobility work. And doing so while every inch we add also adds a lot more strength benefits. Now this moves us by far to my favorite leg exercise, and please, if you don't do any of the other exercises, just do this one. The Cossack squat is an absolute must if you want to build full leg mobility as well as strength while adding as much variation to your leg exercises as possible. This is going to help us not only hit all the joints when it comes to mobility, but also hit every single muscle fiber in our lower body, connecting control through balance with strength and flexibility, as well as adding more and more variations that hit our legs in different ways. And we can even add the tiniest bit of upper body flexibility, control and strength as well by adding upper body movement patterns to the lower body movement patterns as a bonus. You can focus on the flat-footed classic Cossack, where you only bring your hip joint to knee height, focusing more on your adductor flexibility while working on a lot of quad strength. You can start raising your heel to add a lot more foot musculature inclusion. External hip rotation in the extended leg, now working more on our flexibility in our posterior chain. Move through dynamic pseudo hip thrust, now adding posterior chain strength as well, specifically our glutes and our biceps. And reversing this movement in a controlled manner is going to require a lot of strength from your hip flexors, which, now that we've taken care of the flexibility through lunges, we can add the strength through Cossack squat variations. And if you want to truly get all the benefits from this exercise, you can check out this video where we go through pretty much the most important variations of the Cossack squat, moving us to one of the most goated single leg exercises, being the classic split squat, adding a massive amount of flexibility to our entire anterior chain, moving through our knees all the way up to our lower abdominals, lengthening our quads and our hip flexors while adding a lot of strength to our quads and our glutes in the hind leg, which we need to go into this hip extension, and doing so while adding a lot of balance and a lot of strength. You can add some explosive type muscle fiber recruitment as well, which is going to help you a lot more with putting on size, additionally to the endurance, the strength and the control we are building through classic Bulgarian split squats. Then we've got the pistol squat, which is probably the most beloved calisthenic leg exercise, not only because it looks pretty impressive, not only because it builds a lot of strength and mobility, but also because it connects your lower body to your upper body, because you need a lot of core strength to be able to elevate your butt from the floor and to keep the balance throughout your core, helping you be able to go through a full range of motion, sitting down all the way, extending both legs, pulling in massive hip flexor engagement, core engagement and quad engagement through the entire extension, making this one of the more advanced leg exercises, but also one of the most beneficial. Moving us to an even more balance dominant exercise that focuses a little bit less on strength, however a little bit more on our core and stabilization. The shrimp squat is an amazing addition to your leg workouts, especially so because it addresses the exact problem we were talking about before, which is foot strength, which is once again responsible for reducing our injury risk as we age and as we become stronger throughout our other workouts as well. Once again, being an exercise that works a lot on hip mobility as well as hip strength, so you don't have to worry about working on this separately. Since most of these exercises were more quad or anterior chain dominant, we can move more towards our posterior chain, lengthening our calves and our biceps by moving down with an extended leg and then flexing all of those muscles up to our glutes to extend our hip once more, again requiring a massive amount of balance balance and stabilization, while building massive amounts of posterior chain flexibility combined with strength, and a lot of control that is going to help us with, for instance, the pistol squat and the shrimp squat, with only two very tiny things to keep in mind so you can get the full benefits from this exercise. Being number one, extend your back first instead of moving down with spinal flexion so you get the most amount of posterior chain flexibility benefits. And the second thing is, be sure to stay parallel to the floor with your hips. Your hips will start to compensate for lack of strength, a lack of balance, and a lack of flexibility by turning outwards. So keep that in mind. Stay somewhat parallel to the floor with your hips, somewhat extended in your back, and move. If your end range of motion is here, do not worry about it. Over time, once you start developing more of a feeling for this and adding more flexibility, you will be able to move down lower and lower, increasing your range of motion and therefore increasing your strength benefits. A way more strength dominant exercise for our posterior chain. The reverse Nordic curl is pretty much the heaviest exercise you can do for your posterior chain with your own body weight, because it requires an insane amount of control, an insane amount of strength. And I would highly suggest, if you are a beginner, to go through very tiny ranges of motion until you develop the necessary feeling for activating those muscles. Over time, increase your range of motion, work with an elevation like so, and only give the tiniest push to help you reverse this movement until you can go through the entire movement. The only thing I would advise is taking frequent breaks, because the reverse Nordic curl can lead to a lot of cramping and a lot of pain, so just be mindful of that. If you're looking for an exercise that works the exact same muscles but is a little bit more accessible, adding a little bit more engagement of your glutes as well, you can work back on the floor, pull your feet in closely, and move through a full range of motion by actively pushing your hips up as much as you can, flexing your entire posterior chain, especially your glutes and your biceps. And if you want to increase your range of motion, you can start moving up onto your tiptoes, adding even more leg strength and calf strength for insane recruitment of those exact muscles. And then you can add some elevation to go through an even longer range of motion, even more activation of our entire posterior chain. And this moves us to the Agility King, an exercise that I would highly recommend you if you have legs. Of course, I'm talking about standing vertical leap or box jumps, not only working with both feet, but also single-sided box jumps. For one, because as we age, we barely jump around anymore. And frankly, I miss that from my school years, but also because adding explosivity is by far one of the best ways to add some agility and to add real athleticism. Not only is this exercise also a lot of fun to do, but it is very easily scalable. Once again, all we need to do is increase our elevation for a longer range of motion, a higher vertical leap, and over time, you will become very proficient in doing those high jumps from a standing position. And since we're mostly working on fast twitch muscle fibers, this exercise can also help you build a lot of size if that is one of your goals, and having way more control over your leg musculature through fast movement patterns. And last but not least, taking a page out of the animal movement patterns, exercises that are going to help you combine a fuck ton of mobility with an insane amount of strength and control. We've got some short lateral ape-like movement patterns. We've got long lateral ape-like movement patterns to add even more hip mobility and even more adductor stretch. More frontal ape-like movement patterns with our hips as close to the ground as possible, adding an insane amount of hip flexor and quad engagement, and moving forward and backwards for even more control and an even better mind-muscle connection. The same with elevating our hips higher to add the tiniest bit of posterior chain flexibility as well, while shifting our hips to a different position. These being an absolute staple if you want to add a lot of mobility and combine it with a lot of control, because we are strengthening our mind-muscle connection in all of those unilateral movement patterns, and doing so while combining our lower body with our upper body in one single movement. And there you have it. Minimal equipment, a lot of different variations, a lot of different styles, fast twitch, slow twitch, mobility focus, strength focus, and all kinds of interesting exercises you can now start using to mix and match, combine, put together the exercises you enjoy most, and make yourself a nice athletic leg workout that is going to help you stay healthy and increase your quality of life as you become stronger and as you become older. And of course, if you like the video, and come on, subscribe. We almost do stuff like that every single day, which means I'll see you tomorrow. So until then, Captain Cairo, peace out.